listening to This Is Our Story. Welcome back. And at this point in time, we're still in Taranaki at my place in our makeshift studio. So welcome back to Kieran.
Thank you for having me in more ways than one. Thank you for having me in your house and in your lounge room. And thank you to you all out there in the wide, wide world for joining us once again for our little wee journey through life. Congratulations.
This time we wanted to jump straight into our story time with a few memories about gifts that we got over the years from our parents.
Yeah. Well, these are kind of like funny stories that we often tell each other. We don't really have these conversations with mum and dad.
No.
Because, they wouldn't like that. But we often have received gifts that have kind of inspired a bit of a quiet chuckle or cackle for some of them.
Entertainment value for sure.
Yeah.
They've definitely not been the best at giving
gifts,
giving gifts or coming up with appropriate gifts, I should say. What was some that you got that you wanted to mention?
Well, I mean, to kind of juxtapose to the gifts that mum and dad gave, when we were young, we actually received some pretty cool gifts from mum's family because, as we've talked about before, they were quite close. We were close, as in we used to go to a lot of Christmas gatherings and such, but they were physically close as well. So they were most likely to be invested in our lives. But they loved little kids. They've always loved little kids in that family. And we often received some pretty cool gifts as children from them.
I don't really remember any, to be honest, from them. But so
I do remember from Grandma, who my mum's mum, receiving a science kit. So my mum's mum, she was an odd character. This is kind of getting off a little bit off topic, but she was quite intelligent. Not much of it. We did talk about the fact that she wasn't really into kids.
No,
but she liked me because she sensed a little bit of her in me, and that kind of natural intelligence and curiosity, and she wanted to really kind of inspire that. And this was, I guess, the motivation behind this science kit. I had a little what do you call it, a microscope thing, and it was a whole kit to kind of do little experiments with bugs and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it. I don't remember using it a whole lot, but I did appreciate it at the time. But interestingly enough, I think it was this whole gift-giving thing in mum's family, with kids. It was one of the things I think that precipitated us moving away from that, because once we got older, they stopped giving us as many gifts, and I don't think mum liked that. But apart from that, going back to parental gifts, I've had a few watches given to me, which is they're quite nice watches. But the thing is that they were always very impractically sized. I remember getting this gigantic gold watch, and it was so over the top. I was like, Mum, I just cannot wear this. Imagine it'd be like the equivalent of wearing a giant gold chain or something. It's just, I do not wear accessories, and then to give me a giant gold watch was like, thanks, but I don't know what to do with this.
But that wasn't the worst gift.
Yeah, I mean, there was another time when I was living in Thailand. They sent me a package. They would do these kind of quote-unquote care packages every now and then. And Dad thought it would be a good idea to send me some. They knew it was thoughtful. They knew I loved fruit buns, right? Bread. I love bread. So they thought probably would be missing fruit bread in Thailand, which is true. But, when you send stuff from Australia to Thailand, it doesn't arrive overnight. It literally takes weeks. So by the time those bread rolls, fruit buns got to me, they were a long way from edible. Stale, covered in molds. Squashed. And that was pretty much it, I think, and maybe a pair of socks. What about you? I think you've got the better story, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's not something we've actually mentioned, but a few years ago now, but Mum and Dad were living in Saudi Arabia, and I guess it's a tricky place to find presents for someone, like Western style presents anyway. And this one year, I was left gobsmacked at the present when I opened it on Christmas Day. Oh, it just makes me cringe. It was soap, but it was labelled virginity soap or virgin soap. And I was like, what the hell? Like, are they trying to say something? Like, am I supposed to be washing away my sins?
Wash away that impurity, Briar.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
I don't know if it was a genuine mistake or tongue-in-cheek or I don't know. It was really fucking weird.
A little bit difficult to explain.
Yeah, and I kind of didn't really know what to say, like, thanks for the soap. I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere too, just for comedic value. I think I kept it in the box because there was two. Not only one, there was two.
Obviously, you were so dirty. You've got some extra shit to wash away.
Yeah, that's it. So that was a bit of a sort of out the gate present. But another year, Mum sent me and this is like I'm a fully grown adult when she sends me these gifts, right? She sent me a gollywog, and
what's a gollywog?
yeah, I was about to say, for those that don't know,
because they've now been cancelled and you can't find them.
They were very popular in the 80s, I think.
They're much older than that. But they're a product of like colonial times, basically.
But yeah, essentially it's a black doll, and I mean, you can't even call them gollywogs anymore. I think they changed the name before they stopped producing them because it's quite offensive.
Well, they basically represent like slaves.
Yeah.
That was the design.
And for some godforsaken reason, Mum thought that I would like one. So she sent me this black doll with like, it had this blue stripy dress on. And when it arrived, I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? Like, I'm an adult. I don't have kids. Like, what am I supposed to do with a doll? So in the end, we ended up putting it on our guest bed, and we had a friend come and stay one time, and he was really drunk, and we tucked him in with this gollywog, and in the end, he ended up taking it home, and it's just been sort of this laughable matter since then that he shacked up with a gollywog. I feel like I can't even say that anymore.
They have been well and truly cancelled. Don't even know if you can even find them anymore.
No. Really. So yeah, that was just some of the and you know, over the years, even still, Mum still tries to send us presents, even though we say, look, we're adults, you know, we don't need presents at Christmas.
It's an ongoing saga.
Yes, but yeah. So that was our experiences over the years with gifts.
Yeah. Well, I guess, okay, moving on, segueing into our story, back to the story. So where we last left off, we were talking about Briar's first kind of forays into single life, and I guess we're just going to continue on from that and just kind of talk about what it was like. How did it feel to be on your own, and what did it feel like to be having fun, and, you know, having been through this whole stage, this journey myself, and, you know, being alone and having to go through all that stuff again, you've got on both hands, right? It feels great to have this newfound independence, and you can do whatever the hell you want. But at the same time, it feels too fresh. It's like you can't quite be yourself.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Yeah. So I had just come out of the marriage, and then I was 6 months later dating someone for 6 months, and that ended. And so going into 2012. 2012, as I mentioned before, was a very busy year for me with work, travelling, etc., and doing my own travel. Then it must have been just before July, so it must have been June. I had booked a trip with a friend of mine to go to New York, and it was like a once-in-a-lifetime trip. We'd saved up loads of money, and we were going for almost 2 weeks.
So this is kind of a story that kind of epitomizes this particular stage of life, right?
Yeah, because again, like for those 6 months after I broke up with this guy, you know, single again, and we just wanted to go to New York and have fun, and yeah, we'd saved all this money, and my friend and I, we went out for a night out in Madison Square Gardens, and we met these two guys, and one of them was a bit older. I reckon he would have been in his 40s, maybe even 50, and a younger guy, maybe in his 30s. And they told us that they were pilots and they flew Learjets, like private planes with bands and famous people. So they were like, oh, we're just here for a few days from LA. Like, you guys should come to LA with us for a couple of days. And, we were sort of teetering on the edge of like, is this guy for real, or is he just making this up to sort of, as like a pickup line? And we went to go buy a drink together and discussed like whispering and saying like, what do you want to do? Like, we've spent all this money on this New York trip, but do you want to go to LA? But are they for real? Anyway, in the end, my friend, I can't remember the conclusion we came to. We were just like having a good time, and we ended up going back to these guys' hotel room, and I think it was just assumed that, I would have one guy and she would have the other, which wasn't the case. And I didn't want to be left alone with this other guy. So when we got to the hotel room, I said to my friend, I was like, I'm going with you. Please don't leave me with this other guy.
Poor guy.
Yeah, probably a bit of a chopped down his ego a little bit. But anyway, so we stayed the night at this guy's place. All three of us just...
When you say this, hold on a second. You stayed at this guy's place. Please explain a little bit more clearly.
So I had nothing to do with it, but I was just there. I was not...
You were present.
Yes, I was present. That's it.
So some guys just like started mowing the lawn. I'm going to close the door.
So, yeah, I was just there. I was sleeping, pretending to sleep, facing away from them too while they were having a good time.
Doing the deed.
Me, not so much. I was just there pretending to be asleep.
How bad was this other guy that you chose to be in a bed with other people not taking part, but not in
He
this
was
bed?
old. He was old, and just that's not what. Yeah, I was not up for that. Anyway, we'll just fast forward through that. So the next morning we leave. My friend and I jumped in a taxi. Now, bear in mind, this was like Monday morning rush hour traffic. We were dressed from the night before. We were going back to our hotel. My friend and I were just sat in the back seat. We were just sort of on our phones. Next minute, there was this big commotion. The taxi driver had hit somebody, like somebody that was crossing the road. Like, you can't make this shit up. We jumped out of the cab and we were like, what the hell? You've just hit somebody. This guy, his leg was all like mangled. And we were like, we are not paying for the taxi. Like, you've just hit this guy. So the taxi driver was kicking off because he wanted us to pay. And he was like, I didn't mean to hit him. Anyway, so we ended up having to stick around because we had to give a statement to the police. And then because, me being a Kiwi, my friend, she was from Czech Republic, the policeman started hitting on us. Like, he was asking where we're from and like, oh, I like your accent.
American saying.
Yeah, so bold.
Cool down, buddy. Cool down.
So we had to give our numbers and emails and stuff anyway because we had to provide a statement as to what had happened. And we were like... So we got another cab, and once all that drama had calmed down and went back to the hotel, we were like, what the fuck just happened? Like, it's a crazy story, but nonetheless, it's true.
They're kind of one of those like spontaneous type adventures that generally don't happen later on when you've quote unquote settled.
Yeah, no. So yeah, that was sort of a funny memory. But yeah, we spent, a good 10 days in New York and did some awesome things. But yeah, that definitely stands out as a memorable moment.
I mean, like, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to share about your... No? Well, I mean, so what was it like at home? Like, were you still going out and partying a lot, dating a lot, whatever? Like, what was your experience for that, like, 2012?
Pretty much, yeah. And I mean, like I said, I was actually hardly in London at all because I was travelling so often. So I was going out when I was back in London, But
Like clubbing or...
yeah, clubbing, going out, meeting friends, again, a lot of drinking. But yeah, that was not happening as much as the year before because I was so busy with work and away. So it was, when I was home in London, it was more about catching up with my actual friends. So...
Did you ever kind of like get yourself in situations where you're like, looking back, like, how the hell?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how am I still alive?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, haven't we all been in that position?
I mean, you're more likely in that kind of stage of life to put yourself in potentially dangerous, compromising situations because you just don't give a shit, right?
Yeah, and that's it. I definitely had that sort of, excuse my French, fucker attitude. I was just like, I don't care. I really don't care. I just wanted to live my life to the fullest and just do what I wanted to do without regarding any consequences whatsoever. And to be honest, for sure, looking back, I genuinely think I don't know how I got through that situation without being harmed or, yeah, like I definitely had my friends telling me off for putting myself in situations like that, and I just sort of brushed it off, which I should have been more careful really, but you know, when you're in that mindset, you just don't care about those things or even think about them.
Yeah. I mean, into all this kind of chaos and stuff, your life kind of took a bit of a different turn when you met somebody. So we would just like tell a bit about that story, how that came about.
Yeah, so when I got back from New York, it was July 2012, I met this guy who, actually this was back in the day when Instagram, it was kind of...
Very low key.
Yeah, it was. Not many people were on Instagram, like 2012. It seems like 4 years ago, but it really wasn't. It was like 11 years ago. Yeah, so it was kind of newish and not many people were using it much. So I met this guy who happened to comment on one of my photos.
How did he even find you?
So this guy had been planning a trip to New Zealand with his friends, and so he was kind of looking, he must have been looking up hashtags or something, and he just happened to come across my profile. How organic is this? This is so cute. So he commented on one of my pictures and realised that I was a Kiwi living in London. And so we kind of struck up conversation. But back then, Instagram didn't have like the DMs, like you couldn't private message. So we were having like long conversations on
just
like this,
on comments.
Yeah, just in the comments section. So actually, you could, if you really wanted to, you could go back onto my profile and find the picture that we were having that conversation. And I think I said to him, because I realized that the comment section was just getting ridiculous with all these comments, I was like, oh, do you have this thing called WhatsApp? I think it was WhatsApp back then, or it might have been something else, like Vibe or something. And so I posted my number on a public forum. Luckily back then nobody really was
paying attention.
Yeah, paying attention to that kind of stuff. So yeah, we ended up messaging, and he didn't live in London. He lived in Yorkshire, which it's about a 2-hour direct train journey. And yeah, so he was planning this trip with his friends, and so he wanted to get advice, I guess, about places to visit in New Zealand. And yeah, he just started, he's like, oh, can I come down and meet you? And I still remember to this day the first phone call we had, because I'm a kind of person that hates phone calls. I'll avoid them at all costs.
Even now?
Yeah, even now. And he was the same. And we'd been talking for ages via messaging, and one day I decided, I was like, fuck it, I'm going to call him. And we always talk about this because I called him, and in the typical Kiwi fashion, I went, hello. Because if you don't know already, Kiwis tend to go up at the end of every sentence. And so we talk about this a lot. And so, yeah, he just started coming down to visit me in London, and I really liked him, got on with him, and he was really good value, good company.
But I mean, obviously it was just kind of also a transition time for you, because you were, what, a year and a half out from having left behind a marriage, and not a short, not insignificant amount of time in that marriage too. So there was a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But you were slowly kind of moving into this different stage of life, slowly.
But actually, I liked the fact that I connected with this guy, but I was quite open and honest with him that I'd come out of a long-term relationship. I wasn't looking for anything. So, it was cool to hang out with someone I really connected with, just on a friendship level, actually. And I hadn't mentioned this before. You probably don't even know this, Kieran, but I was planning on leaving the UK. I'd planned to move to Chicago and just start.
What had precipitated that? Go on.
Nothing really. I guess maybe it was itchy feet, and because I was single, it was maybe just me, again, feeling empowered to make my own decisions, to be able to go where I wanted, when I wanted.
Start.
Yeah. So I'm so glad I didn't, because I definitely wouldn't want to live in America, let alone Chicago. But anyway, so I was literally teetering on the edge of moving and making a big life decision. And so this guy, I was upfront. I said, hey, look, don't get too attached, because, I'm thinking of leaving. So over the sort of the next 6 months, we were visiting each other quite a bit, he was coming down quite a lot. And then towards the end of 2012, so I had been planning this trip for a long time, but I had planned to go back home to New Zealand to surprise everybody, and Australia, because I hadn't been back in 4.5 years. And at this time was like, Kieran and I still weren't really talking.
Well, not at all, actually.
No, we weren't at all.
I think just before this trip, you had sent me a message. I think you were trying to gauge, because you didn't even know. Remember, I was back.
Yeah.
You sent me a message about wanting to, I talked about this, a couple of episodes ago, about wanting to catch up and talk about things. And then I was like, well, actually, I'm not there anymore. And that wasn't long before you were actually going on this holiday.
Yeah. So I hadn't told anybody I was going back. And at the time, Mum and Dad were living in Australia, and you were as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in Melbourne at this stage.
So I had been planning this trip back for like about a year, I think, or just under a year. So when
Mum and Dad were in Darwin, right? It was just adopted brother was in Harvey Bay.
Yes.
And we were going to be visiting.
Yes.
I had already planned to go with my partner to Harvey Bay in Queensland, Australia, to visit the adopted brother with him and his family, and then our parents were going to be coming down from Darwin, I believe, at that stage, to join us, and it was going to be this family affair,
Christmas.
minus you, of course,
because they weren't expecting me. So, and because the guy that I was seeing, he had planned this trip to New Zealand at the exact same time, so we're like, oh, cool, like we'll meet up in New Zealand. So anyway, Christmas came around and I flew into Brisbane and made my way up to Harvey Bay. So the only person that knew was our adopted brother, and he picked me up, and this was Christmas Eve 2012, and I didn't want to wait till Christmas morning to surprise them. So I went around, and I'll see if I can dig out the video of this, because he recorded the reaction, and it was pretty emotional, actually, because it had been a long time.
And a lot had happened.
A lot of...
And you hadn't even really been talking to Mum and Dad much, right?
No. Or yourself. So there was a lot of stuff a lot of emotion just sort of bubbling away under the surface. And actually, we hadn't mentioned this before, but a week before I was due to fly out, we had a terrible tragedy in our family with my cousin. She unfortunately was killed by her ex, and that was, even though I hadn't seen her in years, that was just, I took that really hard, actually. And she was only 23, and it was hugely emotional for me, and I was just an absolute wreck before.
I didn't realise it was at the same time, actually.
Yeah.
Because we must have talked about that. I remember talking with you about it.
Yeah, it was the 12th of December. And the way I found out, actually, and I'll probably always resent Mum for this, she sent me a text message to tell me, and without thinking about what time of day it was, what I was doing at the time, how I might take that news. And I just happened to be at work with the kids, and I was dropping them off at school. And in the UK, when you go to reception, which is like when you're 4 years old, you have to wait outside until the gates open and then you take the kids in. So I was stood outside, read this text message, and was trying to hold it together. And I quickly took the kids into school, I didn't want them to see me upset. So I sort of kissed them goodbye and and I ran out of there, and I just collapsed and was bawling my eyes out. And I couldn't go back to work the next. I texted my boss and I was like, "Look, I've just had this happen." And this was all just before leaving to go back home. So yeah, there was a lot of emotion just bubbling away under the surface. So when I arrived, it was a very emotional reunion, and I'd actually left my job. So I was going for 2.5 months. The family I was nannying for, they didn't want me to finish, but it just sort of was coming to a natural end. And so
It was like a real new chapter, right?
Yeah. I was ready for 2013 to be a new, fresh year, new start.
It was quite that family Christmas was a big deal in many respects because we had all this drama in the background going on, which we didn't address. We all knew it was there, but I guess we were just trying to move on. There was a lot of awkwardness though. After that initial emotional reunion. I personally didn't find it emotional. I didn't know how to react.
Yeah.
And one thing I always remember is that Mum didn't recognise you.
Yeah, she didn't.
She introduced herself, and that was quite amusing at the time. But in terms of all the stuff underneath, I wasn't able to talk about it yet because I was quite emotionally stunted myself, having still in the middle of all my shit that was going on at home. And as we've talked about before, we're quite emotionally stagnant when we're all together as a family.
Yeah. Or very awkward.
Yeah, socially awkward. Well, not socially awkward. Emotionally awkward.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have some good memories of that holiday in general, like just hanging out. It's the only full family gathering we've had. Or did we have one more in Harvey Bay? Anyway, it was definitely up until that point, it was the first.
Yeah, in a long time.
Since I had left home, probably. So it was a big deal for us. And yeah, there were some good times there. Some awkward times too, but generally mostly good.
Yeah. I just remember the actual physical reunion being really awkward. I think I burst into tears just because I don't know, it was just the emotion of it. But then I remember I saw you, and because obviously it was the first time I'd seen you, we hadn't been talking, and
it was an awkward hug.
Yeah, it was a very awkward hug, and your partner as well gave me a even more awkward hug and didn't really say anything. I guess she still felt like she didn't want to know me, but anyway. So I spent, I think, a couple of weeks there. That's right, at New Year's Eve I flew to New Zealand because none of my New Zealand friends knew I was coming either. So I was going to meet the guy I was seeing. I was meeting them in Queenstown for New Year's. And pretty much from there, I travelled around the South Island with him and his 5 other mates. It was such a good time.
It was like it was a dream trip, right?
Yeah. And, living in New Zealand, you don't really do all those sort of touristy things that we're famous for. So I decided that I was going to, do the bungee jumps and the skydiving and do all those things that the tourists usually do. So, we spent sort of a few weeks doing that before I went up north to visit my friends and stuff from the North Island. So it was a big trip, reconnecting with people. And then when I went back home, I went via Melbourne to visit you. And I stayed with you for a while. I think I was there 2 weeks. I stayed with a friend and for 1 week and a week with you and your partner.
Yeah. On that, because we'll circle around to this anyway, but what was your impression at this time of how things looked?
I was definitely ready for that fresh start, and I think reconnecting with people who knew me really well, it was like a release of pressure in a way. Like, when you've been bottling stuff up and you just kind of fill your cup, so to speak. So although things were still not 100% with us or with mum and dad.
It felt like, even for me, even though we weren't really connected in the way that we are now, like from the outside looking in, you looked a lot healthier. Like mentally, physically, just generally in a good
And I think because I'd, quote unquote, lived a bit of life and sort of had been making the most of that. And that, everybody needs to go through that, I think, have that bit of life experience. Yeah. And so, going back to the UK, it was like, I decided I really liked this guy that I was seeing. And I think, I don't know if it was that trip or, the New Year's and wanting a fresh start, but I was like, I really like this guy. He's stuck around, even though I said I wasn't really interested in being in another long-term relationship. And he came to pick me up from the airport the day I got back, and I said to him, "So, are you going to ask me?" And he, officially asked me out, and that was
strength to strength since then.
I guess I can reveal, like, I'm 11 years later still with the same person. So
I guess, obviously, probably about time to switch back over to me. Back to me. So I guess to kind of catch up to the same point. So after coming back to Melbourne, I basically, there's not a huge amount to talk about really in this first part, but just kind of tried to get back into life, even though I was really kind of unhappy to be back in Melbourne. It was just something I had to do. But when I came back, the first thing I did was actually transfer to a different university from Monash Uni to Melbourne University. Just after my King's College experience, I wanted to be somewhere perhaps a little bit more prestigious, or just I wanted a real, I don't know, it's hard to say. I just wanted to probably be a better uni, and Melbourne University definitely has a more of a prestigious feel to it. So I transferred and changed my subjects slightly. So I moved away from doing history and ancient history to doing, because I gave up on the archaeological dreams, because I realized it was a pipe dream, really. I wasn't going to be able to go around digging up, graves and stuff. Well, not a whole lot in Australia, and definitely wasn't going to be much financial benefit being an archaeologist on our side of the world. So I switched over to history and politics and international studies at Melbourne Uni, and just kind of proceeded to carry on with that. I really, really enjoyed studying. I've always enjoyed studying, but those topics specifically were just real interest areas for me anyway. And so it was quite cool to be learning things that I was interested in, even though I had no real idea what I was going to do with it. It was, I kind of changed off the cuff, but didn't have a plan for the future, so to speak.
So where were you at in terms of like churchy stuff? Were you still, like, did you find yourself getting back into church when you went back? Or
Yeah, so what had happened before we left to go to the UK, we had joined a church, and had been a part of this church for about a year. Pretty involved, make quite a few friends there, was involved in the music. And when we came back, we just kind of slotted back into that church. It felt different though. Like, it always feels different when you go back to the same place. You've got the same people there, but things have changed. And my best friend at that place, he'd found a girlfriend while I was away, and was basically already almost shacked up with her by this time. And it just meant my experience of being able to go and I used to go out and hang out with him a lot in my spare time, and there was a really tight group of us, and that changed. Those dynamics always change when people start settling down, right? Anyway, so it was quite hard settling back into church again. Tried to do things in the same way, joined the music and things, and I think things they were just starting to get really tense with my partner quite consistently. We would have, I don't know, she wasn't keen on, like, I wanted to go out and see friends and things, but she just preferred to not. We didn't have the same friends. They just didn't relate as well to her. Not many people did relate very well with her. We ended up moving on from this particular church. We had another church drama where basically we had the pastor in this particular church. He had a very kind of, I actually liked him quite a lot. He was quite intense. His leadership style was quite intense. And it came across, unless you understood him, it came across at times as being a little bit too forceful. And maybe it was, maybe with a couple of steps back, maybe it was unhealthy. I'm not really sure. I don't remember it clearly enough. But he was, well, my partner interpreted his style as being quite controlling. I personally didn't feel that control. I don't think any other people did, or maybe, I don't know, maybe some people did, and she found some people
who... I guess it's perspective, right? Yeah. It's just whether you find them relatable or not.
Yeah, and I guess, everyone has their different triggers, and my partner had a trigger about control, which is super ironic.
Yeah.
Very, very ironic. But she thought it was her position or her role to basically give feedback to this pastor, but not just from her, on behalf of everyone.
Oh,
so
makes me cringe.
Like, no one was aware that this was going to happen. I was, because she told me about it, and I didn't think it was a good idea, but I couldn't stop her from doing it. I didn't force her. I could never force her to do anything, but I didn't think it was a good idea, but I just had to go along with it. And so she wrote a letter to the pastor laying out the fact that she and a number of others found his methods or his style a bit forceful and controlling, and that perhaps he could make some changes.
Had she actually had conversations with other people, or was that...
She did, but and she'd, I guess the way she had these conversations, she would ask leading questions.
Yeah.
And she kind of connected dots. We've talked before about how the fact she used to connect dots to things that perhaps weren't actually linked. And maybe other people were just kind of going along with it too. They didn't think anything would come of it.
And also you wouldn't disagree with her, would you?
Yeah, and again, there still was probably a kernel of truth in what she was saying anyway. But was it her? Did she have the authority to challenge someone in leadership, or was that the way to do it? There were no conversations with him directly, because she said she found him too overwhelming, like his presence, which I can get it. I understand that. Anyway, there was a lot of fallout from that. It was can you imagine? All of a sudden, a pastor thinks that there's some kind of revolt, like some kind of revolution happening in the background. And I was just caught in the middle. So people were coming to me to ask, like, what the hell is going on? The pastor came to me because we had a fairly good relationship. He's like, can you explain what's going on here? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily agree. Like, you'll have to talk to her about it. And so you can imagine that made my partner even more mad, because I wasn't wanting to back her up. And that was a big deal, not just in this situation, but just in general in our relationship, as I had to 100% always be on her side. Yeah. And that was a constant issue in our relationship, that I wouldn't back her 150%, because I couldn't disagree, and I definitely couldn't disagree with her in public, which is also ironic, because she had no qualms about the opposite. But needless to say, things just kind of got a little bit messy, and we ended up moving on from this church, and we got involved in a church in the city quite a, I would say, aspirational megachurch is probably how I would describe it. I don't even know what precipitated us specifically getting involved in that church. I think we tried a few, but when we walked into this church, it was like your classic megachurch. And if you're familiar with megachurches and megachurch culture, you would 100% recognize this place as being that. So you walk in and you're just immediately consumed by positivity. You are surrounded by it. There is no negativity in this place. Everyone was friendly. Everyone says hello. Straight away, you're being connected with. There's a very.
It's like a business operation.
It's a very smooth operation. Yeah. So, and the more you get into it, the more you know that it's not a mistake. It's not accidental. It's planned. But we got into this place. You kind of brought in. You've got. After this, you have a great service that is a lot of fun and music is great. The leaders seem really approachable and funny, and the message seems relevant. And then after the service, you're immediately connected with a team of people who want to get down your details and kind of invite you to come along again. And it was a great experience. How could that not be? It was just, It was awesome. After what my partner had considered a very controlling environment, right? This was an environment that was free and fun and it had only good vibes. Anyway, so fast forward, we basically got right into this church, and I don't want to, there's a lot to share here, but I don't want to, this is not necessarily the forum for it, but it just consumed us. More so, I think, because I was desperate for some purpose in my life. I'd just been floating around, not really knowing what I was doing. Job-wise, I had started doing some part-time teaching, which I never thought I'd do, but it's another story. Just kind of, I was doing random removals and just trying to make some money because my partner was the prime earner at this stage while I was studying. Had no real black and white plan after uni. So I was just desperate for something that would kind of give me something to do that was bigger than myself. And I got involved, really, really involved with music. I got involved in, it was mostly music actually, to be honest, but there was other kind of avenues of volunteerism that I got involved in. And that was a big deal in this church. And in most mega churches is you just get involved. Yeah. And that was one of the things that people are usually signed up for really quickly is,
dedicating your time to
you're
giving back.
You're sold this idea of this church, this journey, this relationship with God will mean more to you if you are giving back. And we don't do this because we have to. We do this because we want to. We are building the house. We are building the kingdom, the house being the church, the kingdom being just the kingdom of God, his kingdom on earth. We are here to bring people in. But the more we got into this, the more formulaic, the more of a smooth operator you become because you get better at it. But you don't think that you're doing anything bad because it's just so natural. And I'll be honest, I was good at it. I was good at the music stuff. I was doing solo performances to conferences of thousands. It was a real high point. Not for me, of course. It's all about God and building the kingdom, building the house. But I became so engulfed in this church bubble that it became everything. I was involved in church activities maybe 5-6 days a week. At one stage in the final year I was there, once I finished at uni, I actually started volunteering at church full time and I started working at the housing estate, the local housing estate, full time throughout the week. And I was just doing teaching English. I was doing music with them because they had their own little branch of the church there as well. And just doing general service at this community centre.
Was your partner involved with anything?
Well, so she was working full-time in her teaching role, and that took up a lot of her time, but still, like, for me, like, things at home, they just were not healthy. They 100% were not healthy, and by this time, I'd completely woken up to that as well, and I didn't want to be at home.
So it was a form of escapism, really, being 100%. Busy in the church.
100%. And we did actually go through a time of, I don't know, I can't remember the specifics of it, but where we ended up actually going to a pastor and saying, telling that we were having some difficulties. And I remember, like, he was very approachable and very understanding, but I didn't get anything from it. It was, kind of talk about it, pray about it together, with him. And that was it. And then after that, there was just kind of this feeling of let's just keep going and just keep pretending.
Yeah.
There was no end game in sight for me. I didn't see anything beyond it at this stage, but I will admit that I did imagine being with other people. Just fantasy. Like, not actually seeing how that might happen, but just imagining what it would be like to be with these people that I would meet. Say at uni, I was coming across these really cool people who are a bit younger than me and having a lot of fun, and going back, it was like going back in time to the first time at uni where I'd have crushes on people. It felt a little bit like
probably
that.
more the idea of them, right? Somebody who's normal and someone you can have a joke and laugh with, and
yeah, and I was kind of becoming myself again as well, and kind of creating this fun identity that recreating, because that's how I always had been. But it was at odds with this as I was starting to find myself. It was at odds with my partner, who she couldn't cope with that. She couldn't cope with me finding myself, and she kept trying to wrestle control back.
Yeah,
sometimes
I was about
physically.
to say it probably felt like she was losing control
Yeah.
of you, and that you were waking up.
There's one particular time. There's a lot to share, actually. I'm just realizing the time. There's a lot to talk about here. I went out to a birthday party and with some of my uni mates, and I came back that night. Wasn't even super late, but I shared a taxi with one of my friends and dropped her off in the taxi, and then I went back home and I paid for it on my credit card. And I got back and my wife was waiting for me, and she was fucking livid. She came in when I tried to walk in quietly, not to wake her up, because that was one thing you never do. You never wake her up. Sleep was sacred. Anyway, she came in, stormed in, ran into the kitchen, came back with some scissors, grabbed my credit card and chopped it up in front of me.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was how my night ended. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot that happened. And I don't really want to kind of finish on this very dark note, but I'm just noticing the time. And so I think we'll have to pick up in the next episode some more details. But there was a lot that happened in this particular stage for me, where it's funny how things have kind of gone opposite, because whilst your life was heading towards this long period of peace and stability, mine was about to get fucked.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, please come back for more.
Leave you on that sort of hook to come to the next episode.
Oh, Jesus.
The drama is about to begin. Not about to begin. Some drama. More drama.
Well, it's about to come to the fore, really. Anyway. Yeah. We'll save that for next time. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And just a reminder, you can follow along on our Instagram page at ourstory_pods, and our Facebook page, which is just This Is Our Story. I presume you can find that by searching it.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll sign off there, and we'll see you again very soon. Ka kite.
Bye.